Blair Best. Tonight on The Story, our studio is looking a little different. We're in the middle of some technical upgrades, so tonight we're bringing you the show from inside the newsroom. And we've got a lot to get to. Another wrinkle when it comes to light rail on the new interstate bridge between Portland and Vancouver. Another city in Clark County voting to oppose the trains across the Columbia. Plus, PGE wins a key approval to cut down hundreds of trees in Portland's Forest Park. Why they want to do it, and the outrage from park advocates. But first, Oregon's public defense crisis is at a crossroads. The 6-year plan to fix it is being criticized by a state agency that basically says the plan is doomed to fail. It's our big story tonight. First, some background for you. Last month, we took a deep dive into Oregon's public defense crisis, which is causing thousands of criminal defendants to be released without representation, meaning those cases aren't being prosecuted for weeks or months, sometimes not at all. Multnomah County District Attorney Nathan Vasquez says it's not about a shortage of public defenders, it's that nonprofit attorneys are refusing to take enough cases, which he calls a work stoppage. A nonprofit attorney we spoke with said that's false. Instead, he says, these attorneys are burned out, many leaving their firms, and the attorneys replacing them are not experienced enough to take on as many cases. Now, that is a very boiled down version, but if you'd like to see our full report, there's more on kgw.com or our YouTube page. But since our report last month, things have escalated. The Oregon agency in charge of fixing the public defender problem is the Oregon Public Defense Commission, or OPDC. They're the ones with a 6-year plan to get the state back on track. But recently, a state lawmaker, Democratic Representative Paul Evans, asked a different state agency, the Oregon Judicial Department, to help break down that 6-year plan so he could better understand it, writing, "I'm generally able to absorb bureaucratic jibber-jabber. Unfortunately, I cannot make heads nor tails of the report." Well, someone at the Judicial Department got back to him with a pretty in-depth analysis of the plan, and it was not a shining review. Far from it. They basically said the 6-year plan does not actually seem capable of getting us out of this crisis anytime soon, if at all. And they gave reasons why. First, the plan calls for a different caseload model, which would have attorneys taking about half as many cases as they are now. You can see comparisons here. The plan calls for using the National Public Defense Workload Study model. The Judicial Department's analysis says the 6-year plan underestimates the amount of cases public defenders in Oregon need to handle, especially in terms of felonies and high misdemeanors. You can see the actual caseloads there in yellow, and then the estimate from the 6-year plan in peach. So, the OPDC is planning for public defenders to take fewer cases, but the Judicial Department is saying the plan to solve this moving forward won't cover enough cases. Does that mean even more cases will go unrepresented? Well, the 6-year plan wants to solve that issue by nearly doubling the current amount of defense attorneys. The number of public defenders in Oregon has been going up gradually over the last few years, but because of turnover, it hasn't been going up fast enough to actually meet the pace of OPDC's plan. And if the state wants to keep expanding the pool of public defenders, it's going to have to keep spending more and more money to get them. And there's no guarantee the legislature will give it to them. So there are problems just about everywhere you look here. More cases than expected, fewer attorneys than expected, and plans to have public defenders take fewer cases. Doesn't really add up. And that has lawmakers like Representative Evans wondering whether Oregon is realistically on a path to deal with the crisis or making it worse. He actually called for the OPDC's executive director to step down and said the National Guard should be mobilized to provide attorneys. So far, that has not happened, and perhaps was a bit of a political showmanship, but you get the message. And that brings us to another issue with the 6-year plan that could have major effects here in the Portland Metro, especially in Clackamas County. Currently, Oregon law phases out contracts with private public defense firms by 2027, most of them in larger groups called consortia. Those consortia are a major component of Oregon's current public defense system. Now, people we've talked to in those groups say they handle something like 60% of public defense cases across the state. They're also probably the most stable source of public defenders the state has right now. There's not as much turnover compared to nonprofits. And under the state's current 6-year plan, that phases out consortia by 2027. The only alternatives will be to work for a nonprofit, take a job at the state trial division, or work independent hourly contracts with the state. Now, folks in consortia now tell us many attorneys would likely take fewer cases as part of the hourly contracts or leave public defense altogether. In Multnomah County, a consortium is the third largest provider in terms of caseload, behind 2 nonprofits. In Clackamas County, the consortium is the only provider. It's called the Clackamas Indigent Defense Corporation, or CIDC. They routinely hit or exceed their caseload limits, and Clackamas doesn't have anywhere near as many unrepresented defendants as Multnomah, Washington, or Marion counties. So why is that? Here's Executive Director Kevin Like.
The simple answer to that is we have a lot of very experienced attorneys who've been here for a long time, and an experienced attorney can handle a higher level of cases, a larger number of cases than a new attorney. And again, you have people that have been around for a while making a reasonable living. You don't have the kind of turnover problems that they're having in some of the other jurisdictions. And turnover is just a killer when it comes to criminal cases. You have somebody leave and they've got 50 or 60 cases in their caseload. Those cases get moved on to a new person. They get shifted. A lot of institutional memory is lost, and it just builds upon itself and gets completely dysfunctional. And we've been incredibly lucky to keep and maintain really good people. It's a common line that we use all the time. People don't leave Clackamas Indigent Defense, people retire from Clackamas Indigent Defense.
Now, we also spoke with one of the defense attorneys working with Like's consortium, Ruben Medina. Both of them worked as nonprofit public defenders elsewhere in the Portland metro area once upon a time. So they know what that's like too.
I think Multnomah County, the caseloads have always been a bit difficult to handle. When I was in Multnomah County, my caseload was very high. You know, we represented everyone, and there wasn't an unrepresented crisis, but they were very high caseloads. And I think that's because of the population level in Portland and Multnomah County. My caseloads, if on average, I probably had like 130, 140 cases at a time. I have at most half that in Clackamas County today, sometimes even lower than that.
According to Like and Medina, things work much more smoothly in Clackamas County. In part, that's because their consortium has a reliable roster of attorneys. The caseloads are more manageable, and they've built strong relationships in the local justice system. But as we mentioned earlier, consortia are supposed to go away in 2027 when the legislature made that decision with Senate bill in 2023. A lot of consortia attorneys were stunned. They don't think lawmakers understand the consequences, and attorneys argue it's because those in Salem were not seeing the full picture.
So those decisions were made without the full breadth of information in regards to what consortia do in the state. Today, we have numbers that we can work off. We know that consortia handle a large volume of the state's indigent defense cases, probably a majority. To be honest with you, we also know that in the majority of counties in the state of Oregon, consortia are the only game in town. They're the only ones providing indigent defense work in those counties. And so I think that's one of the considerations and why this is back on the legislative agenda, because why would you eliminate a consortia model that seems to be working in a lot of the counties in the state, including here in Clackamas County?
The legislature is considering changing the 2027 sunset on using consortia, and tomorrow night we'll explore some of the bills being discussed in Salem. I'm sitting down with the district attorneys for both Multnomah and Washington counties in the morning to talk about that. But it's worth noting that of the public defenders we've talked to, both nonprofit and consortia, none of them think that their way is the only way. They say each method of public defense serves a purpose.
I do this work because I love it. And the thing that scares me is what that's going to do to all of the people out there that need attorneys. And you think about this, I don't know, I worry about maybe the public think about it sometimes and they're like, well, it's just a bunch of people who got charged with crimes. But there are people in there who have low-level offenses, and because the cases are pending and not resolved, they can't get housing, they can't get jobs. It's a downward spiral for them. And that's even setting aside the people who are just flat out innocent.
So the Oregon Judicial Department sees the state's 6-year plan as a mess when it comes to public defenders. And so does Representative Paul Evans. But what do you think? Email us at thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail 503-226-5090, or you can always hit us up on social media. Well, now to some news of the day, where this afternoon a group of Portland and Gresham leaders along with Multnomah County commissioners met to publicly talk about the area's response to homelessness. There they are inside Portland City Hall. 10 people make up this so-called steering committee. Now, this is the second one of these meetings that I've sat through, and there's not a lot of action per se, but we think these meetings are important considering the group will basically steer our homeless response. A majority of the first half of the meeting was talking about who is in the group and if they have the right representation. County Commissioner Shannon Singleton was very vocal, challenging leaders multiple times to include frontline workers in these conversations.
I feel like it's missing frontline workers and people who actually participate in services and who's listed in membership. And so, not today, but at some point, I'd like to understand how they're a part of the conversation. Okay. I love our bureaucrats, and what's actually happening on the ground can be really different than what we think it might be.
Now, a big thing this group wants to do is track monthly inflow and outflow. That's how many people are newly becoming homeless and how many are leaving homelessness. They also want to eliminate people ending up on the streets after leaving inpatient care, jail, or foster care. That happens to a lot of people right now. And there were talks of setting beds aside for these people. But these leaders said this will not be easy.
There is a lot of energy around ending discharges to the streets out of carceral settings. And this is a huge endeavor, as many of you know, which again is a very big scope of work.
There's also the interim Multnomah County tent and tarp policy that expires at the end of this month. Now, that policy in part allows the county to purchase 2-person tents meant for homeless people. It limits the number of times providers can pick up those tents from the county warehouse each month. And with just a few weeks left before that interim policy expires, we'll be keeping an eye on this group to see if or how they recommend changing it. All right, we're taking a live look right now to the board of directors for C-Tran. Clark County's transit system is meeting. On their agenda tonight, whether Clark County residents will help pay for the cost of operating light rail on the new interstate bridge between Portland and Vancouver. Now, that comes out to about $7 million every year. C-Tran initially said they were not going to help pay for it as a condition for approving the bridge plan back in 2022. But in November, they backed down to say they may help out because they wanted to be included in conversations about the bridge project. Tonight, we're expecting a vote to decide whether to go back to their original conditions to not help out. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But it comes after 2 cities in Clark County recently voted to not support light rail. Camas unanimously voted last month to oppose it, and last week, Battleground went the same way. Battleground City Council approved a resolution stating they opposed any extension of light rail into Clark County as part of the interstate bridge replacement. Some city councilors said it's because they don't want Portland's problems coming across the bridge.
My concern is when we bring in light rail, that's going to bring a lot of Portland's homeless over here and they're going to be depleting our already exhausted resources. Now, I can speak from experience, and I'll leave it at this. I live in Washington State because what I saw happen in my neighborhood because of the metro that came in. I lived in Portland for over 10 years. I'm an Oregonian, born and raised, and I was forced to move my home as soon as the metro came in. My neighborhood, they gave us these great benefits, what they're giving us today. You know, they're looking at the bright side. Unfortunately, everything's double-sided. You know, the downfall was overnight, my neighborhood changed. My kids couldn't even walk to school anymore without profanities being screamed at them from homeless and drug-addicted people sitting at my curbside.
But the council was split. 2 members and the mayor voted to oppose the resolution opposing light rail, not because they want it, they absolutely don't, but because they think the resolution sends the wrong signal to the people in charge of the bridge project. Here's Battleground Mayor Troy McCoy.
What does this decision do? This tells the people of Battleground we're fighting against light rail. All 7 of us don't want light rail. This resolution doesn't change that. So what we're doing is we're putting our heels in the sand. And what's the pro of that? What's the positive of that for our taxpayers if it takes us away from the table to fight for our taxpayers when this comes back? Because if we remove ourselves from the table, and that's what this resolution may very well do, there's no reason for Vancouver and Clark County to talk to us or listen to us at the table if we basically say we're going to veto what you want to do.
Now, to be clear, neither Battleground nor Camas would be getting light rail, whether they wanted it or not. It's only going to Vancouver. But if C-Tran ends up deciding to pay for maintenance, Clark County residents in C-Tran's service area, which includes Battleground and Camas, would likely be paying for it through a higher sales tax. Battleground voted 4-3 to oppose light rail joining Camas. Neither city has a seat on the Interstate Bridge Project's executive steering group, but C-Tran does. And Battleground and Camas each have a seat on the C-Tran board. We'll let you know what they decide. Well, coming up next on the story, Highway 30 northwest of downtown Portland comes with its share of environmental controversies. On one side, the Willamette River and the Zenith Energy Terminal. On the other, Forest Park, where PGE could soon cut down hundreds of trees for a transmission line project. But even after getting a city permit this month, it's far from a done deal. Details when the story returns. Nearly 400 trees are slated to come down in Portland's Forest Park as part of PGE's plan to expand transmission lines near Highway 30 along the Willamette River. The city approved PGE's permit on Friday, followed by outrage from park advocates. Now, those who have been fighting this plan from the start tell us they plan to appeal. Catherine Cook has the story.
It was a blow, because this is such an iconic spot.
Forest Park means a lot to Scott Fogarty. He's the executive director with the park's conservancy, and he's been fighting Portland General Electric's plans to add new transmission lines and upgrade existing lines through the park. But on Friday, the city approved the project, which entails the removal of nearly 400 trees along Highway 30 near Linton. Crews will also fill in 2 wetlands impacting 2 streams.
We just feel this is the wrong direction for the city to go in. It's kind of a slippery slope. If you open this Pandora's box, if you will, who knows in the future what permits could be granted.
PGE says this is phase 3 of a 5-part plan to update their infrastructure to meet growing demand for electricity. It would add a new quarter-mile section of transmission line on the edge of Forest Park. PGE stated their case during a city permitting hearing in January. The Portland Metro Chamber supported it.
Without swift implementation of the Harborton Reliability Project, our region risks an unacceptable likelihood of outages during extreme weather events when our community most desperately needs reliable power.
PGE pledged to replant native plants and trees, which they'd be responsible for maintaining. Fogarty says such a mitigation plan might look good on paper, but ignores immediate impact.
Even if they plant another 400 trees, it's going to take another 30 plus years to get the ecological and environmental benefits from those trees, for example.
The deadline to file an appeal around the city's decision is March 21st. Otherwise, the plan moves forward 4 days after that. The cost of filing an appeal is around $5,800.
It seems like a high number, and it is. And so we're looking at how do we do that and who do we partner with on appealing this.
Well, that was Catherine Cook reporting. So far, no response from either the city or the land use hearings officer who approved the permit. On Friday, PGE issued a statement calling the city's permit approval an example of the process, quote, working as it should, and said, we appreciate that this decision weighed all evidence. We'll keep following this. Stay with us. We're back right after this. Well, the KGW Great Food Drive is going on now, and one way you can help is donate cash or food at any Rivermark branch. Plus, all this week, Rivermark will match the first $5,000 donated. To see all the ways to donate, or if you need assistance, visit kgw.com/food drive. We want to thank local Toyota dealers, Pacific Office Automation, Rivermark Community Credit Union, and Safeway for supporting this year's food drive. Well, in Eugene, veterans and their supporters protested outside a VA clinic over planned cuts to the department by the Trump administration. 80,000 VA job cuts were announced last week, leaving many veterans concerned not only about their resources, but federal workers across the country. Nearly 25% of VA employees are veterans themselves. Protesters expressed concern that the layoffs could weaken crucial support systems.
The reason I'm here is because I'm concerned about workers at this facility, plus federal workers all over the country. I believe they're getting a raw deal by what Elon Musk is saying to them. And it really angers me, and all I can do is be here and hopefully be of some support to the federal workers of the country.
Now, the move could also have a devastating impact on the economy. Here in Oregon, VA jobs contribute more than $190 million to the state's economy. Meantime, 60 universities across the country, including Portland State, have received a warning from the federal government. Many of them saw pro-Palestinian protests last year. The education secretary said in a letter that the schools had failed to protect Jewish students on campus and could face, quote, potential enforcement actions. At least 84 colleges had students who held protests, set up camps, or occupied university buildings last year. More than 3,000 people were arrested, according to a tally by NBC News. Well, that is the end of our show, folks. Thanks so much for watching. The good stuff is coming your way next. And don't forget, everyone has a story to tell. If you ever miss an episode of The Story at 6:30, we re-air the episode at 8:30 and 10:30 p.m. over on our TV app, KGW+. You can download it right now for free. It's on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. In the meantime, have a great Tuesday night, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.